everybody. Welcome to the Jimmy Dore Show. We're going to see you July 15th in Chicago and July 1st in Portland, Oregon. And then, of course, July 27th back here. We have a special guest on our Burbank show, which is July 27th. But guess what? I'm here with the Miserable Liberal. Hi, Miserable.
I'm miserable.
And Ron Placone is here. Hi, Ron.
Hey, Jimmy.
Now, Ron Placone is also doing a tour with his buddy Graham Elwood, the political vigilante. And you're going, where are you going?
We're hitting the road June 20th through 24th. We're going to be in the Southeast. We're going to Nashville, Huntsville, Asheville, North Carolina, Louisville, Kentucky, and Atlanta, Georgia. Tickets at ronplacone.com.
All right. So I promised you I would talk to you about what happened in Oslo, Norway. So we got invited quasi through the Young Turks, although the Young Turks did not finance our trip or anything. But they had a relationship with the Freedom Forum, the Oslo Freedom Forum, and it's run by the Human Rights Foundation. And how do you get a name like the Human Rights Foundation? You just make it up, and then you say that's what we are. And then people go, well, the Human Rights Foundation. Like, I could call it the Jimmy Dore Show Human Rights Foundation, and people would have to refer to it as the Jimmy Dore Show Human Rights Foundation. Because I just made it up, which is exactly what they did with the Human Rights Foundation and the Oslo Freedom Forum. So we got invited to the Oslo Freedom Forum, and what they have is they have all these people who are fighting against dictators and stuff. And like we interviewed one guy who was a protester in Tiananmen Square back in 1989, and he had a tank roll over his legs. We interviewed him. So those kind of people, like really courageous people. But then I found out, and I was excited to go. And I couldn't wait to go to the forum and all this stuff. And then they have an opening press conference, and it's hosted by Thor Halvorsen. His real name is Thor Halvorsen Mendoza, but he wants everyone to think he's Norwegian, I think, or something. And he looks it. And he turns out what these guys do, him and Garry Kasparov, is they're really not human rights fighters. They're really pushing regime change in countries that the military-industrial complex wants regime change in, right? And so that him and his father, Thor Halvorsen. Here, I'll show you. Let's show a little bit of it. So we're here at the opening ceremony for the Freedom Forum. We're waiting for the panel, and Thor Halvorsen, not the CIA guy, Thor Halvorsen, but his son. So this Thor Halvorsen, he's the director of the Freedom Forum, and he's Thor Halvorsen Mendoza, and he comes from Venezuela, and his father was in the right-wing government there twice, and they're against leftists, it turns out, right? So they hated Chavez and tried to overthrow him, and that's what this is all about. So this is all about presenting people under the guise of fighting for human rights, but it's really about neocon agendas and regime change in the military-industrial complex. And this is Garry Kasparov, the chess guy. What the fuck he knows about anything besides chess is beyond me. Turns out not much. And what they really don't know how to do is to cover up their agenda. Because all I did was ask a question, and all shit broke loose. So what? So this is Thor Halvorsen. So that's who that is. And he went to school here in the United States, and he actually started like a right-wing newspaper at his college. And he was, among other things, anti-gay and stuff like that. And I've since done reading, and there's some people have already sniffed him out. Max Blumenthal has sniffed him out. I think a guy named Ken Silverstein has also sniffed him out. A Norwegian journalist has sniffed these guys out. And it took me about 2 seconds to sniff these guys out once I got there. I was excited to go to the thing. I was looking forward to it. I didn't know I was going to not be on board with them. But here.
Whoever says the sentence, I'm going to Oslo to hang out with Thor, how is that not an exciting thing?
Already.
I know, right? And his dad's name was Thor, too. Thor. And here we go. Is the director of the Freedom Forum, and he'll be speaking and giving everybody an introduction. This should be good. I had no idea. I had no idea what was going to happen. I had been tipped off that this guy Thor Halvorsen he had kind of a shady past. Nobody said. He goes, yeah, it's kind of not sure where they get their funding from, and he's got a shady past. His dad was working the Venezuelan government, and had something to do with the CIA. This is what I was told, and I was like, oh, this is going to be fun, right? It'd be interesting to meet a character, not this kind of character I thought. And that's again Garry Kasparov next to him, the chess player, what that has to do. So anyway, here we go. So right before me, they opened it. So they introduce all the dissidents. Like there's a dissident. Now, isn't she from China? North Korea. So she's from North Korea. And they have all, I don't know, this guy's from, I think he's got something to do with Saudi Arabia, right? That guy? So they had all these different people from different countries that have dictators. And then they opened it up to questions. And the woman right before me asked a question about China, and here it is.
The event this year, the theme this year is to rise, because we think we all need to get involved in the struggle for human rights. We are here for you. That is the message that we have for activists, for advocates of democracy, for technologists who are interested in making a difference, for philanthropists who want to make investments that they can leverage, that can have an extraordinary return on investment, and that return on investment, of course, is human freedom. I'd like to thank my colleagues and open it to question.
Human freedom, the return on investment is human freedom, along with regime change and military-industrial complex profits, and probably extracting the natural resources and giving it to a Western corporation from that indigenous country. Probably stuff like that, too. I mean, just going by history.
Freedom can be interpreted many different ways, and that word has been used and applied many different ways.
That's right. So here we go. So now he opens it up to this woman, and she actually says, "This is not a question."
I just want to make a suggestion. When you listen to the dictators of the world,
so when they did. He went through this thing. He listed all these dictators, and it was weird that they left off some. And she says this about, please include Xi Jinping. Here we go.
He's a horrible dictator. Guys, with that strong
You can be assured that China is a subject that we will not shy away from discussing at the following forum. Absolutely.
he's gone. Xi Jinping is doing more harm right now.
You can be assured, madam, that we will be addressing China.
So I was like, oh, okay. Of course, madam, we're going to address China. I'm like, oh, okay, so I'm going to bring up the United States. And I thought that they would also be on board with, of course, the United States supports 73% of the world's dictators. They have been killing millions of people in the Middle East for a couple decades now. They've lit it on fire. Look what they did to Libya. Look what they're doing in Syria. Look what they did to Iraq. They're still in Afghanistan going on 2 decades of occupation. I mean, those are human rights violations. Plus, they have a torture facility in Cuba. Plus, we had a torture report. So here we go. I thought they would be on board. Here goes my question. Hi, I'm Jimmy Dore. You know, when you speak of the free world, do you include the United States in the free world? Because they have 5% of the world's population. They imprison 25% of the world's incarcerated. Barack Obama, after he got his Peace Prize, went on to drop more bombs than George Bush, 100,000. And right now they just installed at the head of their intelligence agency a certified torturer. And the world and the people in the United States live in their surveillance state. And the police shoot minorities on the street with impunity, never one being convicted. So when you say the free world, I was wondering, are you included? So he's stopping me. He's shutting. I don't know. You can't tell, but he's going. We got it. Right? That's what he's saying, right, Arno? So at this point, even though you can't hear it over our microphone, he's stopping me. He's trying to cut me off. We got it. Is what he's saying. The United States in that.
Let me be absolutely clear here. Absolutely yes. There is an unmistakable difference between free countries, democracies, and authoritarian countries. The world is split essentially in 3.
So his answer to my question of, do you include the United States in the free world, when you say that, he says undeniably yes. And then he starts to explain that the world is split into 3 parts. Oh, here we go. So I don't know how you could say the country which is the world's biggest penal colony is in the free world. You know, like without any criticism. Here we go.
You have fully fledged dictatorships like China, competitive authoritarian states that have occasional elections that are neither free nor fair, and then you have fully fledged democracies. Now, we at the Freedom Forum and the Human Rights Foundation in general focus our
And the Human Rights Foundation in general. So those are just two names that this guy himself made up. The Human Rights Foundation and the Freedom Forum. Just made it up. Those are two organizations he heads. Both of them. Okay, there you go.
attention on authoritarian countries. Why do we do this? Because if you are in a country that is not authoritarian, you can have a foundation, you can have a policy group, you can have a newspaper, you can have a political party, you can do protests down the street about what's wrong in your country. And if your country puts you in prison for that protest, if your country puts you in prison because you are a journalist and you're saying something that the powers that be don't like, then in that case, absolutely, that country is no longer a democracy.
So let's use his own definition. So he's saying they're not going to focus on the United States or the UK or Israel or anybody else doing horrible human rights abuses because we're not in a dictatorship and you can go protest and you can have journalism. That's what he's saying. But if your government puts protesters in prison and if they imprison journalists, then they're no longer a democracy. That's his definition of what a democracy is. Well, I got news for you. We did protest against the banks running our economy and kicking people out of their houses and ruining our culture. And police take down Occupy LA camp and arrest 300 of them. There you go. There's peaceful protesters trying to protest against the oligarchs. And the state came in, hammered them. But did they do it in a peaceful way, the state, or did they? Oh, no. They police brutally cracked the heads of peaceful protesters. Brutally. Women, pregnant women, old ladies, doesn't matter. Veterans, they did it to veterans. Brutalized veterans. And to the point where in LA they had to pay out almost $3 million to the people they brutalized. None of those cops got fired. None of those cops went to jail. None of it came out of their pension. It came out of our taxpayer money. So the oligarchs tell the guys in government, go send your goons to crack the heads of these peaceful protesters who are protesting oligarchy. They do it illegally, unconstitutionally. They get fined. Who pays the fine? The people they're beating up. Our taxes fund that. It's quite a scam. So by his own definition, that we're not a democracy because peaceful protesters, when we finally did rise up, and this is just one example. I could show you Standing Rock. Okay. I could show you Ferguson. I could show you many, many others. I'm just, for the sake of time, I'm just going to show him that he's 100% wrong. That in the United States, if you do rise up and protest, and your protest has a chance of making a difference, they will crack your head, brutalize you, and throw you in prison, which is exactly what happened. This is from Freedom of the Press Foundation. Obama used the Espionage Act to put a record number of reporter sources in jail. And Trump could be even worse. That's from the Freedom of the Press Foundation. So he used the Espionage Act at a record amount of times to suppress the free press and journalism. So that's no longer a democracy, right? Well, CNN's Jake, this is from PolitiFact. It says Obama has used the Espionage Act more than all previous administrations. The Obama administration has used the Espionage Act to go after whistleblowers who leaked to journalists more than all previous administrations combined. And I don't know if you see what PolitiFact rated that. It's true, and I blew it up a little bit bigger just so you can see. 100% true. Even an establishment rag like PolitiFact will tell you the truth about that for some reason. So what about that? What about people who actually expose war crimes inside of the United States government, this democracy? Well, if we imprison them, according to Thor, we're no longer a democracy. Well, there you go there. And now here you go this. She exposed war crimes that the United States was routinely committing, involved in illegal wars, doing war crimes, and many other crimes. And he was then imprisoned. She was then imprisoned for that. And was tortured. That's according to the UN torture chief rules. UN torture chief rules that Bradley Manning's treatment was cruel and inhuman, is what that says. So, according to Thor, we're no longer, his own definition, we're no longer a democracy. That's kind of surprising that he would make that big of a gap when he's running a grift like he's running, right? You think he would have he had his talking points down, but he screwed up. How about another whistleblowers who told us about that we were being unconstitutionally spied on in a massive way and corporations were helping. What do we do to him? There it is. Washington Post, democracy dies in darkness. The Washington Post view, no pardon for Edward Snowden. Democracy dies in darkness. The Washington Post view, no pardon for Edward Snowden. What did he do? He revealed crimes inside the United States government. That's what he did. Also, he says that he's not going to focus on the United States because it's a democracy, even though under his own definition it's not. So those are just a handful of examples. I could sit here all day and do this, just like Ron pointed out. Dapple also. So even by their own definition, the United States is not a democracy, it's an oligarchy. So, 100% wrong. So that's him gaslighting people. That's the head of the Human Rights Foundation gaslighting people. Thor Helgeson gaslighting you into thinking that the reason they don't focus on the United States is because we're a great democracy already, and if you don't like something, you can protest. And they don't block you up. Like, what country does that guy live in, right? What country are you talking about? That's not what happens in the United States. They hire Blackwater and fucking psyops guys to go infiltrate you like they did at Dapple, and then they'll blow your arm off with grenades. Go ahead.
Well, here's my big question that I would love to ask this guy that I'm sure you've been wondering since you got back. If the whole premise, I thought the whole premise of this thing was to talk about injustices going on everywhere in the world. No. So if he wanted to have this idea that, well, in the United States everything is hunky-dory, why did he invite you? Didn't you want people to talk about what was going on in their country?
Well, in fact, that is correct. That is exactly what they want. And according to their own charter, they say we bring together dissidents, journalists to talk about human rights violations in their own country.
Mm-hmm.
Except my country. I'm not allowed to talk about it in my country. People had tweeted that at Thor after that press conference. And I wish I would have had that. That's a great point that I forgot. That in their own literature, they say that's what this Freedom Forum is about. That journalists, activists, human rights work are coming together, and we provide a platform for them to question their own governments and their protect. But I can't. It gets worse, by the way. So that's nothing. So it keeps going on. Here we go.
People sometimes ask me, people say, oh, you must be very busy with the United States.
You must be very busy with the United States, meaning all the human rights violations that the United States is committing internally and externally. To which he actually says,
they say, actually, this is a wonderful opportunity to discuss how vibrant that democracy is.
By his own definition, it's not even a democracy. And he's talking about how vibrant it is. We just had an election where they cheated Bernie Sanders because he threatened the oligarchy. So they just cheated him blatantly. The biggest election fraud in the history of our country happened in the 2016 primary. That happened. And it was revealed. And the establishment ignored it. And then we went on to have an election where 3 million more people expressed their desire to have one person be president. The guy with less votes, 3 million less, became president. You tell me that's a vibrant democracy, according to Thor.
How vibrant that democracy is. A country where a group of women can wear hats of a certain kind.
Because you can wear hats. Because you can wear hats. Hey, 30 million people still don't have health care in the richest country in the world. And 64% of the country can't afford a $1,000 emergency. Half of all workers make $30,000, but they can wear hats. But look, I can put on a pancake hat. Look, I have a fedora. Look, I can wear my baseball cap backwards. Freedom!
I can wear my football hat where I can go to the game where the team can't protest or they get in trouble.
Team is made, that's right. Where the team is made to participate in patriotism at the point of being threatened with their jobs. So here we go.
And have protest after protest against the president, a country where if you turn the television on.
So this is him whitewashing the United States. So he just launches into this whitewash, this unbelievable whitewash of the United States and their human rights violations. This is kind of mind-blowing at a fucking human rights, free forum.
People sometimes ask me, people say, must be very busy with the United States. To which I say, actually, this is a wonderful opportunity to discuss how vibrant that democracy is. A country where a group of women can wear hats of a certain kind and have protest after protest against the president. A country where if you turn the television on, any channel you go to, on any weeknight, it's typically a comedian making fun of the president. And when I'm saying making fun of the president, making entire careers of making fun of the president.
So that means we have democracy because establishment tools can make fun of the president. But believe me, if any one of those establishment tools actually were in threat of being a threat to the establishment, they would get yanked, like Phil Donahue, like Ed Schultz, like Ashley Banfield, like Jesse Ventura. Anybody who stands up against the establishment gets yanked immediately. Yes, don't let Stephen Colbert make fun of Trump. He's not making fun of this military buildup. He's not making fun of the 8 wars we're in. He's not making fun of that we're the largest penal colony in the world, that we have a racist Justice Department. He makes fun of the racist in charge of the Justice Department. He doesn't make fun of the racist criminal justice system. Do you get? Just like Chris Hedges said, the comedians, they make fun of people. They don't make fun of the system. And he's trying to say we're free because Stephen Colbert can go make fun of Trump.
In a hat of his choosing.
In a hat of his choosing. So people make it, and then and the whole crowd, ha 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 ha. What the F? Meanwhile, we're the world's largest penal colony. They just broke into Chelsea Manning's house yesterday with guns ablaze. Did you know that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a wellness check.
Yeah. Where somewhere, how many people the cops kill every year with impunity? Over 1,000 people a year. I read a statistic where it said 10% of all homicides committed by cops. Here we go. So this is an amazing whitewashing that he's doing. Like, America's the greatest country in the world. And then it turns out he's getting all his money from neoliberals in the United States. Here we go.
We're talking about a place where newspapers are not shut down, where, in fact...
Why would you need to shut down a newspaper that's doing the bidding of your government?
And by the way, newspapers go belly up all the time.
Right, but they don't get shut down by the government.
They don't get shut down, but they go belly up all the time.
By the way, there's six media companies still that own everything. So they don't need to shut them down. They do their bidding. The Washington Post has been behind every war ever. Go watch that movie, The Post, and then you realize that The Post, after that, went on to support every illegal war the United States ever did, full-throated, and we imprisoned our generation's Daniel Ellsbergs. We imprisoned Edward Snowden, Chelsea Manning. We used the Espionage Act to go after journalists. Okay, here we go. And this guy's going to tell you everything's hunky-dory in the United States because Seth Meyers can make fun of Donald Trump.
There were more journalists in prison for refusing to reveal sources, and that's another discussion under the previous presidency than this one. In fact, this president has ended up putting some laws on the books that suddenly some...
Did you see how he whitewashed what Obama did? Did you see that whitewashing? Yes, there was the previous president put some journalists in prison, but this president, like he just... Now watch what he's going to say. This president tried to put some laws on the books, and then suddenly, listen to this whitewash.
Mid-level judge far away in Hawaii says, no, you're not doing this. You're not doing this. I'm striking this law down. And the more the president can do is tweet really angrily about it. Those of us on this table...
So everything's okay in the United States because there was a judge somewhere in Hawaii who struck down an unconstitutional law that Trump tried to push through. So I don't know if you guys know, no problem. Everything's okay in the United States with unconstitutionality, and there's no unequal justice system. There's no human rights violations happening. We're not the world's largest penal colony. We don't imprison our minorities at record clips. We don't have a new Jim Crow called the War on Drugs. What? All that. Here we go. Those of us on this table know that if a judge in a certain country... So this is, again, he's fighting a straw man. They keep creating these straw men that I didn't say that judges didn't have power in the United States. Now, so he just pretends like I'm saying judges don't have power. I didn't say that. And now he's fighting a straw man.
Know that if a judge in a certain country says to the dictator, no, you're not doing this, if the consequences would be swift, different characteristics between them.
So now this guy starts talking, and he actually makes sense. So this guy's actually going to make sense. So here we go.
Democracy authoritarian state, but that does not mean that democracy is done by human rights, and that we should also focus on human rights violations by democracy as well.
He's hating this, by the way. When his guy say this, he's just like, oh.
In the United States, more away from that. And a lot of the things that you listed up, whether it's a violation of human rights or a violation of international humanitarian law, is stuff that we have to address, because when democracies do this, it makes it even easier for the authoritarian states to keep on, because we lose all our moral standing when people can point to our society and say, well, you're doing the same.
So that guy's saying what I'm saying. It's worse when people think democracies are doing these things, because then it makes it easier for dictators. He's got the right idea, but then he still remembers he's invited by Thor, so he says this.
I totally agree with you that these are topics that we have to talk about, we have to address, we have to motivate people to fight against them. But there is definitely a difference between the United States and China.
I never said there wasn't a difference between the United States and China. And he goes, and I think Thor's right for pointing that out. I didn't say that. I didn't say the United States was worse than China. I didn't even mention China. That was the woman before me. Boy, he did not like that. He said that. You see his face just said, and right at the end he remembers, oh my God, that's right, he invited me. And so he says, but Thor's right to point out that China and the United States is different. So that happened. And now, maniac Garry Kasparov takes the microphone. Here we go. So I tried to bring up the point. By his own definition, the United States isn't a democracy because we imprison our whistleblowers and we imprison our people who protest. And he goes, no, we're not going to get. So he hated. Look at this guy's quote. He is not a happy camper, Mr. Mendoza or Mendoza. He is not. No, we're not gonna talk about human rights at this human rights thing. We're not gonna do that. So this guy actually had a conscience, and he knew exactly what I was talking about. And then he wants to kill me. This guy, the human rights guy, wants to kill me. And he goes, no, we're not gonna engage in a debate.
Engage in a debate.
Do you include the United States when you say the free world?
I said it, yes. When you include the United States, but one of the leaders of the free world.
He goes, not only do we include the United States, but it's one of the leaders of the free world. What? The United States supports 73% of the world's dictators. The United States is right now helping Saudi Arabia commit a genocide in Yemen by using a war crime called siege warfare. That's what the United States is doing right now. And these guys are covering it up because Seth Meyers can make fun of the president.
How many people do we incarcerate?
We incarcerate like 4% of the world's incarcerated population. We only have 5% of the world's population.
But China must incarcerate way more.
We actually incarcerate more people than China, Steph.
But we're the leaders of the free world.
We're the leaders. We're the leaders of free world.
So this is what leadership of the free world looks like.
Whoa.
We need to figure out what the real definition of that
is. So what this guy is, he's now outing himself as a tool of neoliberalism, regime change, politics in the United States, a neocon agenda. That's what he just revealed. And if you're a minority or a black person in the United States who's upset with our criminal justice system being racist and shooting you and killing you in the streets, you need to shut up because we can protest.
Wow,
that's amazing. That's amazing.
It's amazing. Okay, now my father's boy.
Me too.
No, this is you.
And he goes, now my blood is boiling. I go, me too. Me too. No, but I don't have a microphone. All these guys actually have microphones that are hooked up to an amplification. My microphone is not. My microphone's going to my camera. It's not going to amplification. So only the people standing right around me can hear me. Which even if they so that just so you know. Okay. Did you want to say something?
I just wanted to say that at this point, Arno and I have no idea why this erupted like this. We have no idea why they decided to be so castigating, and that they each want to respond
to a straw man.
That means you're not supposed to respond.
Yeah, they each get to respond, but I'm not supposed to, and they're responding to a straw man. And in fact, the guy sitting next to Thor who talked, he got it. He was like, yeah, it's worse when the United States does it. Exactly, we should talk. And they go, no, it's not. We're not even going to talk about it because the United States is a leader of the free world and a democracy. That's because they're tools of the military-industrial complex, and where they get their money is from neocons who want to do regime change. That's what this is about. And they're outing themselves. If they would have just responded like that guy responded, sitting next to him, saying yes, of course, and I would have been like, okay, great, and I would have went on and interviewed those dissidents and done my report, and that would have been that. But they overreacted. Methinks thou protest too much, Mr. Kasparov. And they outed themselves. Watch, he's going to go on to out himself, and he's going to say, yes, I was very good.
Yes, I voted in the comments. You know what it is.
Okay.
I know there's people like you who don't recognize what is before the country. We can enjoy protection by law to that.
People like me, what? What did I say? People like me who don't know what it is to be born in a country where you can enjoy protection by law. Why does he say that? I'm pointing out to you, the United States doesn't protect us. That's the problem. I'm telling you about my country. You feel free to tell me about your country, Kasparov. I didn't mention your country. I only mentioned my country. So don't you come here and try to tell me about my own goddamn country. Here we go.
You mentioned bombs about drop. How you didn't drop bombs as you're a dictator.
So he's not for human rights or for peace. Did you see what he just said? You talk about the bombs Obama dropped. I wished he would have really dropped bombs at Syrian dictator. So you're for war. Now we know Jeffrey Sachs, who we showed on the show from MSNBC's Morning Joe Ball, he let the cat out of the bag. He's the professor from Princeton who went on the MSNBC and said, of course this war was started by us, the CIA, and we're arming the terrorists to overthrow Assad because we want regime change. And why do we want regime change there? A couple of reasons. One of them is they want to put a pipeline through Syria. And he's all for it. He's not for human rights. He's for killing those people. He's for dropping bombs on people in Syria. How do you call yourself a human rights foundation when you're pro-dropping bombs on people in a sovereign country? And when we drop bombs on Syria, that's called an illegal war act. That's not okay. But he's all for it. So they're outing themselves that they're neocon, right-wing, fucking pro-regime change war guys. That's what he's revealing right here. Really. And all it took was a dumb nightclub jag-off comedian to ask one question. And watch these guys unravel.
And by the way, it's hard to find or get the answer to why Garry Kasparov is the chairman of this event.
There's no reason.
And how much is Garry getting paid for this?
What is he getting paid? Where does Garry get his money from? There's no... So, okay, here we go.
Killing people using chemical weapons. Did you see kids in Aleppo?
Why does he start screaming about chemical weapons in Aleppo? I'm talking about human rights violations in the United States. Do you see how unhinged he gets immediately? I talk about Barack Obama dropping more bombs than George Bush. He becomes unhinged. Start screaming about Aleppo and gas attacks. Did you see the kids? So if you're for helping kids in Aleppo, why do you want to bomb the kids in Aleppo? That doesn't make sense. Is that a contradiction? A little bit. It's a little bit of a contradiction, Mr. Human Rights. Did you see the kids in Aleppo? Yeah, you wanted to fucking bomb them. Probably by your buddy Putin, is what he said. So now, because I'm criticizing the country I'm from, which is what the mission of this human rights thing professes to be, now my buddy is Putin. Well, where does he get? He just all of a sudden, that's it, because I criticized Obama. Because that doesn't reveal that these guys are neocon, neoliberal, regime change tools of the military-industrial complex and banking and fossil fuel. They're exactly what we're supposed to fight against. And they're using human rights as a shield, and he becomes unraveled. He's calling me my buddy Putin. I asked the question. I'm an American journalist, and his knee-jerk is the McCarthy smear. Knee jerk. Isn't that amazing? After that guy said, "You're right, I agree with everything you said, and it's worse when the United..." But somehow I'm a Putin buddy. Do you see what's happening? This isn't another country. I'm getting a McCarthy smear in a room full of reporters.
Using chemical weapons. It's an level. God is all by your probably one.
What the hell's the matter with you?
Hell with you. With people like you who are presenting as moral equivalents.
I didn't present any moral equivalence. I asked about the United States human rights violations and if we can talk about it at this forum. People like you are presenting. So he just creates this straw man. I'm Putin buddy. I'm for Assad. I don't care about kids.
Between crimes committed by communist regimes, dictators, all sorts of facts in wealth, and the country where you're protected by the law of the land. In every country you have problems. But it's just a shame.
I'm spreading false theories. What false theory did I spread? The guy over to your right just agreed with everything I said. And do you hear their puppets in the audience applauding this? This is at a human rights forum. So he just unravels. Starts calling me, gas attacks. Putin, don't you care about kids? Putin, you're Putin's buddy. You're spreading false theories. What false theory? Do you hear and by the way, the whole room applauds that. That was like a stunner. Now you know why they have it in Norway. And Oslo, a place that gave Henry Kissinger and Barack Obama the Peace Prize. There we go.
And you are trying to turn our attention from the real crimes. People are killing you.
Really?
Killed today. To what? To violations of the rights. People in America can elect their representatives. If you don't like them, you have a chance to remove them in November. You have a chance. We don't have a chance to remove Vladimir Putin. If you don't like Trump, fine. You don't want to say that vote for him now. I don't like him either.
They already did. 3 million people.
Okay, fine.
Shut up. So I was going to say, we already did. 3 million more people voted for his opponent, yet we still got him. That's what I was going to say. Sure, shut up. Did you see that? Sir, both of them, him and Thor. Sir, shut up. Shut up. What? Here we go. He unravels more.
I really sympathize with Garry Kasparov.
Okay, so, and then they throw it to this guy from Iran, who, of course, is advocating for regime change in Iran. Woo, isn't that something? We already did regime change in Iran. It was called Mossadegh. The United States and the CIA overthrew the democratically elected president of Iran. And you know why we did that? Because he wanted to spread democracy around the Middle East and keep his natural resources for his own people. And that won't stand. So the CIA overthrew him, and we installed the Shah of Iran, who committed atrocities and was a strongman. And then finally the people of Iran rose up, and that's how we got the Ayatollah. That was the revolution. So the response to the CIA instituting a dictator, strongman in Iran and ousting their democratically elected president was we got a worse government. We got an Ayatollah. That's who the Freedom Forum is. That's who the Oslo Freedom Forum is. They're two... let's see what... They're run by two grifters. This guy, former chess champion Garry Kasparov, who becomes an unhinged maniac if you ask him to talk about human rights violations by the United States. Starts calling me a Putin buddy. I was called Putin's buddy. And then I'm spreading false theories. And then I probably don't care about kids in Syria. So he's upset that Putin bombed people in Syria, yet he wanted Obama to bomb people in Syria. I don't know how you can separate the people when the bombs drop. You can't. Which is why he's a fucking charlatan. He's for bombing and killing kids. He's all for it. So is this guy. These guys are not human rights defenders. These guys are neocon shills who use the term human rights to advance their neocon agenda. and that's who they are. And immediately after this, he reached out to me, Thor Halverson Mendoza from Venezuela, who's against the leftist governments. Thor Halverson Mendoza then direct messaged me on Twitter and said, "Hey, I'd like to talk to you about our disagreement." I said, "Sure, would love to have you on my show. When can you do it?" And he goes, "I'm a little busy this week." You mean so like while we're both at this Human Rights Foundation forum, you don't want to talk about human rights with me on my podcast? And then that was it. And I said to him, I go, "Hey, you're funnier." When he said that, I'm busy this week. I said, from one professional comedian to another, "You're hilarious." And he wrote back, "I didn't know you were a professional comedian." And I wrote back, "I didn't know you were a neocon con man. We're both learning things this week." And then he blocked me on Twitter, and that was that.
Just so you know, at his Twitter page, it's Thor Halverson. No Mendoza.
No Mendoza.
Interesting. He doesn't want to,
right.
include.
Because you can then trace who he is back to Venezuela, and his father being in bed with right-wing governments and being against the left-wing and people and populism, and being in bed with corporations and oil money and the CIA and all that. That's why he doesn't use his last name, because it's too easy to follow back the money trail. Go ahead.
And on his Twitter page, he's Chief Executive Officer. I'm going to add that to my Twitter page. And Human Rights Foundation, and it's followed up with egregious trolls get blocked. What kind of humanitarian needs to add that to their Twitter?
I know, right?
What? That's ridiculous. But let me ask you, Jimmy, did you ever tweet at Garry Kasparov?
Yes, I did.
What happened there?
You've also blocked me.
So, I was the only one here not at the event. So just for like the total clip notes, are you thinking like 1-star Yelp review? Would you go back? What do you think?
I would definitely go back, because Oslo is such a wonderful city.
Nice.
It is really a wonderful city. It's dedicated to a classless society and the worker. And they take care of everybody. If you're sick, you don't have to worry about it. Everybody gets vacations. Everybody has decent wages. And everybody gets to go to college for free. In fact, even if you're not from there, you get to go to college for free.
You didn't feel well when you got there, and then you checked out Dr. Drop-In?
So what happened was I got sick. So right after this press conference, I went and interviewed 4 people, and I got sick. And immediately I was like, you know what? I'm about to pass out. I'm sick. So I go back to my hotel, and I was in bed from Monday till the time we left on Friday. I was sick the whole time. So I didn't get to go to any more things and stir it up, and I didn't get to interview any more people, and I didn't get to see the city, which is an amazing city. So that's because I was sick. So let's wrap this up. That's my report about the Oslo Freedom Forum. It's a big grift being run by Thor Halverson Mendoza and Garry Kasparov. And
at the end of the Freedom Forum, Jimmy, they give an award, and it's a creative dissident award. And I nominated you, but they passed on it.
They passed on it?
Yeah, but I thought your performance during the press conference was terrific and a shock.
The irony of the being called a Putin puppet when I'm talking about human rights violations in the United States at a Freedom Forum, the irony is almost overwhelming. It broke the irony meter. That I would talk about, and then they would just create a straw man. Somehow I'm for Putin, somehow I'm for Assad, somehow I'm... It's just great. That guy got it, but the 2 heads of the thing needed to shut me down, and then whitewash the United States. Completely whitewash everything the United States does. And that just tells you these guys are tools and grifters, and they shouldn't be listened to. In fact, they should be shamed in public, which is what I'm doing right now. You're welcome.
For 50 years, Value has helped you build, store, design, save. Upgrade, paint, learn. One project at a time. UGL Drylock Latex Masonry Waterproofer is now $19.97 a gallon. Save $7. Save 50% on the Linzer 5-piece brush set, now only $2.44. 50 years of DIY, one project at a time.